A very warm welcome to all. My name is Aparna. I'm a senior engineer with SkillLink, and today we'll be discussing the topic Firebase Backend as a Service. Let's start with the basics. What is Firebase? It feels like there's an app for everything these days. Almost everything. If you are an enterprising sort of a person who likes to tackle humanity's need with an app, Firebase is something you should know about. Now, Firebase is a Google's mobile application development platform that helps you build, improve, and grow your app. We'll discuss into these individually a little while later, but these are the different components of it, and post it, it also helps you promote your app and earn with it. Now, Firebase started as a YC11 startup. It grew up then into a next generation app development platform on Google Cloud Platform. Now, why did that happen? Let's discuss why Firebase. Now, Firebase is technically a toolset which has a list of services in it, which a developer can use for him to then again ease his development process. Now, we'll discuss these services individually, but these are the services that a developer usually has to do himself, but doesn't really like to do it. These are redundant tasks, like let's say there are many apps that are out there, and if you're using those apps, almost all the apps will have you sign into the app or log into the app. And this code to write, this is the authentication part of it. Firebase authentication is one of the services. So if you're writing the code for authentication, it's actually with the security protocols, it's very difficult to do. And this is a redundant task, which almost all the apps that are out there has it. So this is where Firebase comes in. If you are using Firebase authentication, you will barely have to write any code that's there. So Firebase has similar services, a lot of them, some databases, analytics, authentication, configuration, file storage, push messaging, and similarly the list goes on. These services are also hosted in the cloud and scaled then with little to no effort from the part of the developer. Now, when I say hosted in the cloud, I mean that they have their own backend components, and those backend components are then operated and maintained by Google itself. Now, let's see how the application development part has become different with Firebase. This is the traditional approach to it, and this is how it is with Firebase. So, traditionally, me as a developer, if I'm making an app, I would have to code the front-end part of it and the back-end part of it as well. And for that, I would need the servers as a middleware for me to have a contact between my front-end and the back-end component. Now, Firebase entirely removes this middleware. We don't need them at all. Our software development kit will help our client apps to interact with the Firebase. Now, what do we mean by that? It simply means that if you want to use the databases that Firebase offers, you can write your code to query that database in your client app itself, which really helps the part of the backend developer. If you were aiming to be a backend developer, do not worry, this job is not going to go anywhere. Even Firebase realizes that there are parts of it that we have to let the developers control and let them code. So there are services which lets the backend developers code so that they can have more access and more control towards it. I'll cite you an example along with when I'm discussing the services. Now, next up, we have what are the supporting platforms for Firebase. So if I'm making an app, I'll first think, is Firebase suitable for my app or not? Firstly, there are no limits to any kind of app where Firebase cannot be useful. The only limits that we have is the platforms. iOS and Android are both primary focus for Firebase, and all the services that we'll be discussing are available for both and even more. But for C++, Flutter, Unity, as of now, there are limited services which are increasing day by day. Now, what are the features of Firebase? So the features of Firebase have been primarily categorized into three different categories. One being build, grow, and then improve. Now, while I'm building the app, there are different services that I will be needing where Firebase can help me. Authentication, what I cited earlier. Real-time database, Cloud Firestore, cloud storage for file storage, cloud functions, Firebase hosting, and MLKit. These we will discuss individually. Post that, we have a grow part. Grow will be once my app is online already, the data that I could get to help my app grow. Google Analytics, predictions, cloud messaging, in-app messaging, remote configuration, A/B testing, and dynamic links. Lastly, we have Improve, where if my app is online and performance is really low, these could help me with that. Test Lab, Crashlytics, and performance monitoring. Let's get into them individually. Let's start with the build part of the services. As we discussed earlier, these are the services that come under build. Authentication, real-time database, Cloud Firestore, cloud storage, cloud functions, Firebase hosting, and MLKit. We'll start off with authentication first. Now, Firebase authentication, like you already might know what authentication is. Like I said, when you're logging into the app, the authentication is what lets you into the app, and it takes care of you getting identified as well. Now, what is special about Firebase authentication? Now, with Firebase authentication, it lets you log in, have you identified, and the whole thing is done as with security as well. Now, this for a developer to do is incredibly difficult. Now, we can do this with Firebase very easily. It also allows you a single account login, meaning that it will help you log in with the Google, Facebook, Twitter, GitHub. These logins also you can do over there using Firebase authentication. Post this, Firebase authentication is very much needed for the other services with Firebase as well. I'll get into a little bit with other services. I'll explain you how Firebase helps the other services to control the per access user data, which almost all the app that is out there will need. Next, we have Firebase real-time database and Cloud Firestore. We'll be covering these two topics together, given these two are databases. Both the databases are real-time, they are hosted on the cloud, and both of them are NoSQL databases, non-relational databases, and on NoSQL. Now, when I am building an app, I can make a decision whether I want to use both of the apps or both of the databases, or if I want to use one, depending on what my app needs. Both of them have their individual strengths and weaknesses. And again, I can make a decision. Now, again, the special thing about this database is that both of them are real-time. With the help of real-time database, it will set up an alert. It will set up a listener in your database, which will alert with every change that is happening there. And that change will display on your display as well, keeping your display fresh. This can be used, let's say I'm making a game application, or Duolingo is an app which I am a fan of. So there's a leaderboard that's going on. Let's say I took some other thing, I got some more points. I'll move up in the leaderboard, or depending if someone else did those. So a live leaderboard can be maintained using these real-time databases. Similarly, if I'm making a social networking app, for those social networking apps, almost all the apps that are out there have a chat system right now, a messaging system. Let's say if you're making a shopping platform, it has a customer support where it lets you speak to the customer, a chat. Or similarly, if you are using Zomato, on Zomato it lets you talk to the delivery person. Or let's say Uber, to your driver. Almost all the app for the different uses that's there, it allows you to chat. For this messaging system, again, you can use this real-time database. It'll help you if you know, there are many chatting systems as of now. And if it's not in real time, no one will be using it. So again, if your database is real time, you can use either for it, and you can then have a chatting system in your app as well. Let's cover cloud storage next. Now, cloud storage is basically a storage in the cloud which lets you store an enormous amount of data. If you're using this, it scales up to exabytes of data. Now, exabytes is a very heavy amount of data. If, let's say, everyone on Earth, if they had each person had 1,000 different high quality images, even then it wouldn't be exhausted. So if you're using cloud storage, you never actually have to worry about running out of storage, which is great for an app. Now, like I said, it is massively scalable. Now, if you're using cloud storage, it will enable you to upload and download files directly to and from your cloud storage. So if, let's say I am making a game, In that game, I could let my users upload their own custom avatars, what they would like. I could let them upload, and similarly, if they need to download something, they could download the same. If I'm making a social networking app, like on WhatsApp, you can share images across and then download the same. So these things can be enabled if you're using cloud storage without ever having to worry about data. Next up, we have cloud functions. Now, if with Firebase Cloud Functions, you simply have to write and deploy your code and do not have to worry about any of the DevOps operation that is out there. You don't need to provision, maintain, or scale. None of the DevOps operations are required. Google takes care of all these operations. So you simply write and deploy your code. It then is running on the Google serverless infrastructure, and it will automatically respond to all of the events that the other Firebase products might be creating. Now, when I say serverless, I don't really mean an absence of servers. Basically, serverless simply means that there is servers are still in play, but a developer doesn't have to be worried about it. Like I said, none of the DevOps operation we have to do. So we don't have to worry about the servers. So simply this helps us a lot. Now, for example, where this cloud function would help me. Now, if I have a user and that user then deletes his account, once he deletes his account, I should not keep his data anymore. So as soon as he deletes his account, his data will be deleted automatically without me having to do anything. So no scalability, like I said earlier, also needs to be done from the part of the developer. But this is one part of the service of Firebase where we actually allow the users to code. Like I said earlier, backend developers are not going anywhere. We realize that we have to let the developers code. So this is one service and the only one where we let the coders do the coding and so that they could have more control. Then we have Firebase hosting. So Firebase hosting is used for hosting your app online. So now Firebase hosting is really good with quickly delivering static content. Static content is simply files like HTML files, your CSS files, your JS files, your images. These files are very quickly delivered using a secure global web hosting content delivery network. Now, if I have to deliver this static contents, Firebase hosting will look for a server near you and very quickly deliver it. It is also very easy to set up as well, making it easy to use. Lastly, in build, we have MLKit. So machine learning is a concept that almost everyone is familiar with these days, and Google is excelling at it. It is going on in every field possible using machine learning. So MLKit lets you take advantage of this wealth of machine learning expertise that Google has. It can work on any mobile device with very limited computing power as well. So let's say now I am making an app. There are many social networking platforms that are out there. You might have observed if you put out a picture of you along with your friends, it recognizes some of your friends and suggests you to tag them. This is image recognition. This is something that you can use in your app without much knowing about machine learning itself. Image recognition is widely used and you can use it too in your apps using MLKit. Now, before we move on to improve, let's discuss a little bit of how authentication works with Firebase real-time database and Cloud Firestore and cloud storage as well. So when I'm logging into the data, I want to limit the access of visibility to my database and to my storage. Let's say I am logging in to an app. Now I am a user of the app. I may not have the access to change all the data that is out there. I may have the visibility to it, but I can read it but not write it. Similarly, if I'm not signed into the app, I may not even have the visibility to a lot of things. And if I'm logging in as an admin, I'll have the read and write abilities to a lot of things. So this is something that we can achieve using Firebase authentication. If you log in using Firebase authentication, it gives you an identification token. That identification token recognizes you as a user who is logged in, not logged in, or as an admin, or other categories if the admin wants. So based on those diversification and the permissions that you provide, it will let you read and write the data. If, let's say, you're being very permissible with the data, Firebase is even going to alert you about it and give you a gentle reminder to change those things. So this works really well to provide more and more security and the per user access data that we discussed earlier, using Firebase authentication to your data stored in real-time database, either with Firebase or Cloud Firestore, or your data that is there in your cloud storage. Now let's move on to the next part, Grow. So these are the services which are covered in the Grow part of the service. Google Analytics predictions, these work together to better help you target your audience and make changes to your app. Cloud messaging and in-app messaging, these are messaging in different ways to your users. This may well gel with this as well. We'll discuss this. Remote config, A/B testing, and dynamic links. Let's start off with Google Analytics. Google Analytics is the core Grow offering. Now, if I am putting my app out, I want people to be using it. Now, when I'm thinking of when I'm making the app, I may have an idea of what my user base is going to look like. I may have, when I'm making it, I may have targeted those set of audience. Now, when the app is out, I may be practically all wrong. So this is where Google Analytics comes in play. It helps you with the data, who is using your app, how they're using it, what features they're using it, what parts are they using it. So then you can then customize your app and make it better available for them. So it basically lets you find your target audience. Now, what do we mean by audience? An audience is a group of users who have taken some predefined actions in your app. They have shared some user properties and similarly device characteristics as well. So once I have my target audience, I can then target them with the messaging features like we discussed earlier in the Grow category. Now, for example, let's say when Call of Duty was out, they wanted to target young adults and a lot of kids ended up playing it. Similarly, when Pokemon was out, their target audience in mind were kids, and then a lot of adults ended up playing it. So there are multiple instances as such where the app was actually thought for a different user base, and then again, it was then changed to a different user base. This is where Google Analytics will help you. Next up, we have Firebase predictions. Firebase predictions is built on top of Google Analytics. Now, Google Analytics will give us the data that is there, who is using our app, and the whole user base is then customized into different categories. Now, Firebase predictions will just help us make predictions whether those particular user base group is more likely to spend on our app or more likely to delete our app. Then we have Firebase Cloud Messaging. Now, for Firebase Cloud Messaging, it is used to deliver push messages as direct user notifications. Now, what is push messaging? This is something that a lot of us are already familiar with. When you register to an app, or maybe you go to a store yourself, post that there are a lot of messages that you get. With the individual offers or something, you get those messages. These messages are called push messaging. Now, if you are sending these messages across in bulk, then it is more likely to be ignored. Now, if we use push messaging along with Firebase predictions and then Google Analytics, we can target the audience that we have in our different groups, the audience groups or the predictions groups that we have. According to that, we can send out some information of interest to the users, the information that they are more likely to click on. So push messaging will help us do that. So next we have Firebase in-app messaging. Firebase in-app messaging also helps you show targeted messages to your users to engage with the key features of your app. Now, this is something that Firebase Cloud Messaging also does. So how is it different? So Firebase Cloud Messaging is basically the messages are sent from the servers that you control. Whereas Firebase in-app messaging, the messages originate from the app itself. So now again, if you're doing Firebase in-app messaging, these messages are less likely to be ignored compared to Firebase Cloud Messaging. For Firebase in-app messaging, we have some set parameters that we can then, based on the Google Analytics and predictions, the groups that are out there, based on that, we can have some set of criteria out there. So these are the user characteristics or the device characteristics, which when the user satisfies, post that, then these messages are sent out. So these are less likely to be ignored. Next, then we have Firebase Remote Config. Now, Firebase Remote Config allows us to make dynamic changes to the app's behavior and the app's appearance as well, without actually having to publish an update for your app again. Then we have Firebase A/B testing. So when we are having an update to the app, ahead of time, we cannot know whether this will hurt our app or actually help our app. This is where Firebase A/B testing comes in play. So if you have some kind of parameters which you can set to actually measure the success or the failure of an app, this is where you can use Firebase A/B testing. So Firebase A/B testing is used to set up an experiment and conduct it on a handful of users before making a decision. So if you're making some improvement to the app, you first make it available to this group of users, set up some parameters on which you can then decide it as a success or a failure. Post that on the results, then you can make the update to the app. Lastly, we have Firebase Dynamic Links. Now, Dynamic Links improves the app installation process. Now, this is something that you might have met while using some kind of a social networking app. Let's say I see an advertisement for Myntra. So post that I saw a product that I like. Now I clicked on that product, but in my device, I do not have Myntra installed already. It will take me to Play Store or iOS App Store, depending on the device that I'm using. There again, I'll get the option to install it. So once it's installed, it'll again redirect me to the app itself with the product that I was looking at earlier. Such links are called dynamic links, which definitely improves our installation process. That is all for the grow part of the services. Next up, we have improve. So these are the services that are covered in the improve part: Test Lab, Crashlytics, and Performance Monitoring. Let's start with Test Lab. I'm making a mobile app. So for that, while building the app, I'll probably have a mobile on my desk to test all the features that are there. But that one mobile cannot be representing all the devices that my users will be using. They will probably be using from different platforms, even on different platforms, different versions of the OS. So for that, we need to perform some rigorous testing. Test Lab now provides us a scalable and automated app testing on the cloud-hosted devices. Not just this, so this is basically a virtual testing platform where we can test on different devices. Not just this, we also have a physical testing lab available, where all the devices are available of different sizes, different platforms, different OS versions. All of these are available. So we can go there and install our app in these physical devices and check how our app is performing. Next, then we have Crashlytics. Now, Crashlytics is basically the best crash analyzing platform that is out there. It gets us clear, actionable insight into your app's crashes. This, when Crashlytics is then combined with the Google Analytics and predictions, we can actually find out what is crashing your app, or how is it then impacting the users, probably them having a bad experience. But this we can figure out, and this works really great. Lastly, we have performance monitoring. So performance monitoring will help you analyze what are the performance issues that your app is having. Let's say when my app is starting, it is taking way too long. That is a longer startup time. That may hamper my performance, app performance. Similarly, if they are making an HTTP request, that request, if it's taking too long to get a response, that again is another thing that might hamper my performance for the app. So these are some things that performance monitoring monitors and gives me a feedback about for me to work on. So this will combine these, help me to improve my app. Lastly, we have the advantages of Firebase. In advantages, we have Google Analytics. Now, we already discussed Google Analytics in length earlier. Now, to have this much data to actually improve your app without the help of Google Analytics is very difficult to do. So Google Analytics is a very great advantage to Firebase. Then we have free multi-platform Firebase authentication. We already discussed this, that with Firebase authentication, it allows you to log in with a multi-platform. Next, real-time database is available. All the apps that are out there these days need real-time databases. And this real-time databases are available in 2 different forms. This is very useful. Free plans for beginners. As a beginner, if I go to Firebase, I am allowed to make 5 different projects without having to spend any money on it. Similarly, even if you decide to spend something on it and you need some more projects, Firebase is pretty cheap. Lastly, growing community. Firebase is a growing community. Every new app that is coming on these days realizes these advantages of Firebase. And as a developer, they realize how easy they are doing for us by providing backend as a service. So more and more people are using it. More and more services are being added. It's a growing community. Next up, we have disadvantages of Firebase. Disadvantages of Firebase is that it is based on NoSQL. Both the databases that we have is based on NoSQL. So it may cause difficulty to people who are more comfortable using the SQL databases or any other relational databases. We also have limited data migration. Next, it is still growing, so it is not tested to a very high extent. Now, these are the companies which are using Firebase as of now. These are the popular ones: New York Times, Alibaba.com, Gameloft, Duolingo, Trivago, Venmo, and Lyft. As a summary, we discussed all the prominent features that there are with Firebase. There are many others as well. As I said earlier, there are some features that are based on the earn part of it. Once you're done with these things, you have made your app, you have improved it, it's fine, and then again, it's growing. All the things you have used, then you can even promote it using Google Firebase itself. So it's a growing community. There are a lot of features to use with a few advantages and disadvantages, but this is something that you should definitely know about. Thank you.